Well, hello you guys. A little bit of a different setup, and we're going to clear up the clutter in just a sec, but was taking a thumbnail, so yeah. Hopefully this setup is pretty damn good, because a lot of you have been asking for a PC build, and to be completely honest with you, I wanted a PC build. So today we're doing a 3rd gen Ryzen gaming PC build, and I'll run you down with the specs in just a sec. So as you guys can see, I clearly didn't break it in the end because it is running right here. So yeah, to all you haters out there. But let's run down the specs really fast because this thing is quite a beast, and at its heart is the AMD Ryzen 5 3600X. The GPU in it is the AMD RX 5700 XT by Gigabyte, the overclocked edition. The motherboard we are running here is the X470 Aorus Ultra Gaming by Gigabyte. We have 3 fans in the system, 2 by NZXT and 1 by Corsair. That one Corsair fan is also powering our H60 AIO. We have 16 gigabytes of G.Skill RAM running at 3200 MHz. Then we have a Samsung NVMe SSD, a Gigabyte NVMe SSD, and 2 terabytes of additional storage. The case we're running is the NZXT S340 Elite, which was originally made for VR and has a HDMI port at the front. I absolutely love this thing. The power supply we're rocking is a Corsair TX850M, which is a semi-modular 850 watt power supply. And then we have individually addressable LEDs, which actually seem to have started working. Okay, so I'm done taking some pretty damn sick B-roll shots. So let's move straight on to building this thing. So we are actually going to start with putting together the case, because I have some fans I need to throw into the case, and usually best practice is to set up the thing you're going to be putting everything into before you actually start putting the stuff into it. Let's take our NZXT S340 Elite, open it up, and start throwing our fans in. So the S340 Elite is pretty damn cool. Number one, pretty much everything on it is mounted using thumb screws. So everything is really simple and easy to get to. Not only that, but I actually bought this case back when I had the Oculus Rift CV1. And this case was made for VR. It actually has a HDMI port on the front I/O, or the top I/O actually in this case. So for our fans, we are going to be using these 3 that I have. One is for the water cooling, so we're going to leave that for later, but then we have 2 NZXT fans, so we will be using those. One is going to be going on the back, pushing air out of the case, and one is going to go onto the front for sucking air into the case. So let's get those mounted. The fans in this case actually come pre-installed. Now, because this case has been my case for quite some time because I love NZXT, I needed to remove them for cleaning, so we're just going to install them. For any of you wondering, this case was actually modified by me. I spray painted it black and white because when it arrived it was just white and it didn't fit the aesthetic I wanted. Perfect. So now the fans are mounted. Let's actually move on to the motherboard. Now, as you all know, I just dropped the RAM. Great. Okay. The RAM will be fine. That was on top of the motherboard box and I dropped it. So for our motherboard, we are using the X470 Aorus Ultra Gaming, and this is made by Gigabyte. So here we have our I/O plate. Best practice is usually to put your motherboard on top of your motherboard box. So that is exactly what we are going to do. So here we go. As you can see, I have already mounted a custom bracket for my water cooling right here. So that's why these are standing out like that. If you buy this motherboard, it'll have a completely different mounting bracket, but I just put that there to have it out of the way for now. So the next thing we are going to put in is the processor. And now we have the star of the show, the AMD Ryzen 5 3600X. Here it is. So the way you want to mount your processor is actually pretty simple, but you don't want to get it wrong because if you do, you can damage it. Basically, there will be a tiny little white dot on the processor that seems to get smaller every time I do this. So as you can see, there's the tiny little golden triangle, and then on the motherboard, you also have that tiny little triangle. So you want to lift up the retention lever, grab your processor. The processor should just drop right into its socket. No force required. You just push down the lever and it's firmly in place. So because my mounting bracket for my water cooling is still 3D printing, we're going to move on to the SSDs. So I have a 970 EVO here from Samsung. So we are going to take that out of its case. Oh, this is actually not the Samsung EVO. Okay, so this is apparently my laptop hard drive because the 970 EVO is in the laptop. On this specific motherboard, you want to remove this screw holding down this bracket right here because this is the heatsink, and you want to take off said heatsink. Then in your motherboard box, you will find a tiny little screw and a tiny little standoff that you will need to screw in to get your SSD in place. What you do then is you simply just slide the SSD into its bracket, you grab that tiny little screw and put it into that standoff, just like so. Then you want to grab that heatsink that we took off, if your motherboard comes with a heatsink of course, because some don't, and you want to place that right back on top of your SSD. And then of course screw that down as well, just like so. Then I actually have a secondary SSD that I have MacOSX Catalina on. I'm kind of hoping that if I put this in, it'll just boot. So I guess we will live, we will see. So this is my secondary SSD. The first one is a 512 gigabyte. This is a 256 gigabyte. So again, this screw is actually already in the standoff for security reasons, and you just slide it in like the other one. Screw it down, and there you go. Both our SSDs are now in place. Now, normally what you would do at this point is you'd take your stock fan from AMD or from Intel and you'd slap it on. Now, because I'm doing water cooling, I'm going to leave that until the end. So what you want to do now is you want to grab your RAM. I am using this G.Skill Ripjaws RAM that is DDR4 and is 3200 megahertz. On your motherboard, next to the RAM slots, there will always be a little indication of where DDR4 1, DDR4 2, DDR4 3, and DDR4 are. Wow, that was a tongue twister. So of course you want to find DDR4 1, which is this one, lift back your levers. It can be a little bit hard, and you want to slide in your RAM, just like so. And you want to press down. Don't be worried about breaking it. You do need to hear that click. There you go. And then you find your DDR4 2, which will usually be one slot away, and you grab your second RAM and slot that right into place. There you go. So now our RAM is in place, we can actually go ahead and start throwing everything into our case. Let's just start doing that. So what we are going to do is we're going to grab our I/O plate, which is the little thing that goes on the back of your computer to cover up the holes, and we want to slide it into place like so. So now that the I/O plate is in, you can grab your motherboard by the sides and very carefully slot it onto the standoffs. If you had a heatsink on there, you'd normally grab the heatsink and it would be a lot easier. But again, I don't. And there you go. Motherboard is now in place. So now, of course, you want to screw it down. So I'm going to grab the necessary screws and start screwing my motherboard in place. Just like that, the motherboard is now in place. Of course, you can test this by lifting up the case, but please make sure it is actually in place before you do that. If you don't, things might not go very well for you. Now that the motherboard is in place, this is where we would mount the water cooler. Now, I don't think my one is done printing, so once again, we are going to be leaving that till last. So why don't we put in the power supply? Now, on this specific case, again, as I told you at the very beginning, most things are mounted using thumb screws. So all you do is you unscrew this little thing at the back here, grab your power supply. My one is the Corsair TX850M, which is a semi-modular power supply. It has 850 watts, and some people might say it's slightly overkill for this build. I say it's not. So, just like you would on an entirely modular power supply, you need to put in a few cables. Now, I'm going to put in the ones that correspond to me, which is, first of all, the graphics card cable for powering the GPU, which I will plug in to the back of the power supply, and then I will plug in my SATA connectors, because I do have two hard drives in there. One Western Digital 1TB, and I believe one Seagate 1TB. The rest is on my cloud. So now that we have those two cables plugged in, we can actually grab that little bracket that we took off the case earlier and mount it onto the power supply. Now, the fan of your power supply will want to be facing downward. So that's exactly what we will make sure it is doing. You want to grab the corresponding screws and screw in your power supply to that bracket. Or if you're doing a different PC build, you might want to screw in your power supply directly into your case. Either way, very similar procedure. NZXT just makes it a lot easier by including this bracket. Now that we have that bracket in place, I will want to take off the back panel of the case. This is done just so I can see the modular cables. So let's slide the power supply into place. Screw it in using those thumb screws, and there we go. The power supply is now in place. So let's start routing all the cables. Once again, NZXT makes this super easy by giving you these clips here. such as this one, or this one, or this one. So you actually have a lot of room for routing cables. As you can see, here's that HDMI cable that I was talking about. So now you grab your largest cable, which is the motherboard power cable. I don't know how many of you know this, but I think cable management is one of the most important things in your case. So I'm going to use those clips NZXT supplied. Just like that, my cable is routed to the correct place. Then I'm going to grab my power from my CPU and route that up top here. So you can just stick your CPU power right in through there. Then I'm going to route the graphics card power, which again, NZXT makes really simple by putting a hole for it here at the bottom. I want to make something very clear. You can't see me. Hi. This is not sponsored by NZXT. I just love their cases. Now, we're also going to grab the rest of the cables. This is the USB 3.0 header. Usually that will get routed at the very bottom, so let's do that. I'm going to route that through the bottom, right here, to where my closest USB 3 header is, which in my case is right down here. Then I'm also going to take my front I/O. Again, I will put that exactly where I put the USB 3.0 header. HDMI cable can stay here for now, because I can't use it because I don't have original Oculus Rift anymore. Then we have the USB 2.0 header, can also be routed right down next to the USB 3.0, and our front I/O, which can be mounted through the same hole as the USB 2.0. And then we have our SATA connectors. So what we are going to do is we are going to plug those in. Just like that. So now I'm going to turn the entire thing around so that you can see what's happening. Now this is going to look like a massive mess to you, but I'm going to now turn around, go over there, and show you exactly how to work your cables. So now that we are in the front, what you will want to do is you'll want to plug everything in. The largest cable, which is the motherboard power cable, gets plugged in up here. Just like that, you hear the click. Then you want to plug in that cable we routed up top, your CPU power cable, which should also be up top right here, just like that. Now let's route the fans. So what I'm going to do to make this look nice is I'm going to take as much of this cable as I can, push it in through there, through where we got the CPU power from, and then when I think I have enough, I'm going to push it in under this heatsink and plug it in to its designated spot. And I'm going to do the same thing with the other one, but I need to get it all the way down here. So again, I'm going to push it through that top hole, get it routed, and connect it to its designated spot. So now that our cable management is done properly, we can celebrate. Let's start taking off the front panel so that we can install our water cooler. Doing this is usually pretty simple. You just grab at the bottom and pull. And that usually makes it pop off. Now I'm going to take off the dust filter and let's start installing. So the way I am going to install this is I am going to install it so that the fan sucks the cold air in onto the radiator. So I'm going to mount it like so, just like that. And now time to screw the rest of the screws in. If you're doing this with me, make sure you don't fail screwing in the screws and don't screw them into the radiator itself. You want to screw the screws in to the holes on the radiator and not the fins. There we go. Now our radiator is mounted. I'm gonna go check whether plate has finished printing. So I have the 3D printed bracket, but just before we start putting all that in, let's connect the bottom I/O. So first let's connect our front I/O, which will go up here, just like that. Now we connect our USB 3.0 header, like so. Then we grab our USB 2.0 and we can plug that in, and we can grab our HD audio. And there we go. Now all the cables are plugged in, let's mount the CPU. So for this, I'm going to lay the case down again. Okay, so now you're ready to mount your cooler. If you see that there's no thermal paste at the bottom of your cooler down here, you will need to get thermal paste. I'm just going to be using this, and I'm going to apply it on top of the processor the size of a grain of rice. That's what people say, but I usually tend to overdo it just a little bit, like so. That might not even be enough, to be honest. There we go. And then you want to start mounting your cooler. So I'm going to mount mine. There we go. As you can see, this is now mounted on top of the CPU and it isn't going anywhere. Again, I'm going to route my cable and I'm going to plug it into CPU optional. This is the cable for the pump, just like that. Now I'm going to take the CPU fan, route it really nicely because again, cable management, and connect it to CPU fan, just like that. Now, a lot of people will tell you to put the graphics card in last, but we actually have pretty much everything mounted that needs to be mounted here behind the graphics card. So we are going to mount that right now. So I'm going to unscrew these screws at the back, holding in my back plate. Again, just another security measure NZXT has, and I'm going to place our beautiful RX 5700 XT into its PCIe slot, just like so. Now I'm going to screw back in that security bracket. That's again just more thumb screws. And I'm going to plug the graphics card in, the 8-pin and the 6-pin. And then I'm just going to pull the rest of the cable in through there. And there you go. Now all we have left to do is connect the SATA to our hard drives. So as you can see, the hard drives are right here. The power to them is connected. So now we just grab two SATA cables that we want to use to connect. I'm going to take this right-angled one and this flat one. And now again, cable management is key. And now you just find these SATA connections on your motherboard. For me, as I said earlier, they are down here underneath the graphics card. Boom. And there you go. That's the SATA connected. Now this is pretty much the entire build, but of course it wouldn't be a gaming build if we didn't add a few finishing touches. So let's put the case back together and work on that. So putting the dust filter up into here, then putting the front panel back, just like that. Then we can put the back of the case on. So what would a gaming PC be without LEDs? So we have individually addressable LEDs for this beast. So I already have cut the exact length I need. So let's connect them into place. My RGB header is down here, just like that. And let's start routing them. There we go. Now with our RGB LED strips mounted, let's put on the side panel and see if it works. This is the moment of truth. Let's plug it in, give it power. Oh, wow. It should turn on and off 3 times. Yeah, so far so good. Oh. Here it is. Oh my god, guys. Let's do the outro. So guys, I hope you liked the video. This thing was a lot of work, but hey, it was totally worth it in the end. If you want to see future videos like these, and I upload tech videos daily and VR videos on Mondays and Fridays, make sure to smack that subscribe button if you haven't yet with your forehead. Ding that notification bell, become part of the 360p gang. Follow me on my social media here and here, because that's how I communicate with you guys. Join us on Discord. Please join us on Discord. The community is constantly growing, and I'm giving out Discord Nitro. Join us on Reddit, where I want to see your spicy memes being posted so that I can have a laugh, and then I can review them and we can all have a laugh. So once again, guys, if you aren't yet subscribed, make sure to subscribe, ding my bell, and see you again in the next one. Peace.